Welcome to Leaders in the Arena. My name is Jenny Whitener with Bridge Innovate, and it's our pleasure to have you join us today for our webinar and podcast series. We're focused on telling stories of leaders who are actually in the arena, helping them share their valuable insights and lessons across our network. We are Bridge Innovate. We help teams to think, lead, and problem solve differently. Our co-design approach fosters buy-in and drives meaningful change, empowering you to shape your future. Thanks for joining us today. We're so excited to have with us Dr. Mark Mendenhall. Dr. Mendenhall is going to be covering a topic that's near and dear to all of our hearts, especially today in the turbulent times, navigating leadership and ethics. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Mendenhall. Dr. Mendenhall holds the J. Burton Frierson Chair of Excellence in Business Leadership at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. Dr. Mendenhall is an internationally recognized scholar in the field of global leadership and assessment and development and in international human resource management. He's also a partner in the Kozai Group, a consulting firm that specializes in assisting companies in assessing and developing the global skills and competencies of their managerial cadres. Dr. Mendenhall has published over 80 academic journals and journals such as the Academy of Management Review, Journal of International Business Studies, Sloan Management Review, Academy of Management of Learning and Education, and so forth. We are so very thankful to have Dr. Mendenhall with us today. Would you like to share a little bit more with the audience about yourself before we get going?
I'll keep it short. What would be possibly of interest would be at the end of first grade, my parents became missionaries, and I was transported virtually overnight to a small multicultural community in New Zealand where I became an automatic minority, more or less, and spent all my formative years there, coming back to the United States about an hour outside of San Francisco in 1969. I'll let all you historians envision what kind of culture shock that was, just entering eighth grade. I spent a couple years in Japan after high school as a volunteer missionary. And again, I suppose all this is where I get my interest in doing research and consulting in global leadership. And just have been doing all of this kind of thing, both domestic leadership and global leaderships, since getting my doctorate in 1983. So it's been a great life. And it's just, I'm still going. I'm retirement age, but I just kind of just love what I'm doing,
Right.
although I'm strategizing it. So I'll keep it at that. Um,
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. This topic is so critical in my mind in terms of leaders and ethics and all of the dilemmas that are facing leaders today in this very disruptive and sort of volatile marketplace. So thanks for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to you to share some thoughts with us today.
okay, I'm going to go kind of fast. We've got a lot of PowerPoints, but we're going to go fast. And let's go to the next one here. But let's get started, and I'll put kind of the burden on Jenny here a little bit. Put some quick ideas in chat. We'll have her read two or three of each one. What exceptions would you make to the following common rules? And if you have, and maybe don't get into why so much. We don't have enough time. The street only at designated crosswalks. In other words, jaywalking is across the law, is against the law, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take 10 seconds, and then the next bullet will come up. Just 10 seconds. Why would you break the law and jaywalk? Why would you make an exception to that rule?
If you're in a hurry or if you're walking with my husband. Because
Okay, all right.
Right.
Okay. we'll make a citizen's arrest on you then.
That's
Next,
right. Yeah.
do not come to work if you're sick.
Yeah. So you had a
Yeah, why?
really important project, or let's see what some of our audience has to say. What exceptions would you make to the following? If you earned your vacation,
In other words, you feel like you got the flu, but you're going to go into work.
yeah. There's something about earning your vacation days that's a really big motivator.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Oh man, we could go all day. There's so many tangents. Didn't your parents always tell the truth.
Except for when she says, "Do you like this dress?"
Always tell the truth. This is just to kind of get our minds flowing here, okay? What exceptions would you make to telling the truth? The good book says to speak the truth in love, right? That's that would be a whole interesting, different discussion. Next, never kill. Do not, thou shalt not kill, right? Do not kill.
Hmm. Right. So, a little comment coming in around always tell the truth, Mark, where it says, it's better that they don't know. So maybe you always tell the truth if it's better that they don't
Oh
know.
man, I am going to tell this very quickly. When I got back from Japan, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. This is 1978, before a lot of cancer treatments. And he lived for, I'm sorry, he lived for a couple of years. And afterwards, I ran into his doctor after he passed away. And he said, I know your dad really well. I knew your dad really, really well. And I knew that if I told him he had just a few months to live, I knew that he's a fighter. And so I just told him, Earl, you can fight this. Now, I don't know anything about medical ethics, okay? But that doctor chose to lie to my dad.
Hmm.
And anyway, so let's keep going because we could. So,
That's a long conversation right there.
yeah, right. So there are many ethical theories and they're very complex. They are worth studying. These are just some of the major ones. We're not going to talk about them because there's no way in real time you can remember all this when you are faced with decisions. And virtually all decisions have some kind of an ethical context to them. And so, what I'm going to propose to you today is a very simplistic framework that's helpful, not a framework that explains everything or can parse everything, but I guarantee you would have to get a doctorate in business ethics or to understand all of this. People don't have time to learn all this. So let's get into what I'm going to propose as a helpful heuristic guide. So at any given time, ethical decisions involve looking to cultural heritage, formal law, rules, tradition, accepted social norms to see if it's relevant to the decision or the behavior, what you're trying to do at hand. We're going to call that formalism, okay? Formalism. All of the questions I asked were formalistic questions. They were rules, never kill, right? Don't, it's against the law to jaywalk, etc. So we need these or we can't have civilization, right? But at any given time, Ethical decisions also involve trying to discover solutions that bring about the best possible results for everyone in the situation. And that's a very simplistic definition of utilitarianism. In other words, utility, right? And I think all of you probably, none of this is new to you, but just take a look at those two realities that are always kind of in tension. They're in tension with each other all the time, all the time. And I'll just give a quick example, real quickly here, just to kind of get us flowing. I was driving with a friend to Atlanta from Chattanooga many years ago. He was driving and he was going the speed limit. I think maybe at the time it was even 65. And, there were cars behind us. They'd get behind us. They'd pass us, the cars passing by us. And I'd say, well, you can kind of speed up, a little bit and go with the flow of traffic. And he very politely, he wasn't angry. He said, what does that sign say over there that we're coming up to? And 65. I'm like, okay. But, same thing went on. I said, the police, they don't really look at things at like 65. It's kind of like keep going with the flow of traffic and not going like super fast and driving dangerously. And he said, well, what's the speed limit? I said 60, So that's when I realized, oh, okay, we're going 65 or 70, whenever the speed limit change, that's what he's going to do. So on speed limit rules, my friend, who I didn't know this because I'd never been with him while I was driving before, he's a formalist. And I was a utilitarian. So deontologists, formalists have a strong tendency to appeal to natural law and universal rules as a basis for their decision making. Utilitarians, teleologists, really look at consequences as the ultimate guide to the morality of actions. I'm just going to say this when I look at the immigration debate right now. These people are here illegally. Who's going to harvest the crops? Utilitarians are who's going to harvest the crops? Formalists are like they're breaking the law. Now, I know there's lots of nuance and everything, but I'm just kind of giving you that sense. And I want to give you another sense. People on both sides are good people. All right? It's just how we approach decision making. So I'm just going to let you read this. It's just more delineating aspects of formalism, okay? But when taken to the extreme, if everything is just completely formalist, especially in a corporate culture, this is what you get. So the key is at an organizational or a team culture level, the art is having rules that keep that structure in place, but within that structure, having flexibility norms so that there is some freedom of movement for experimentation and looking at ultimate consequences as being what's most important, not just, rigid obeying of rules. But you need both.
I think it's very interesting that you're talking about the fact that we need both, that you can assess someone's behavior or their actions and determine if they're being, a formalist or a utilitarian. But I love this concept that you're calling out to us that we can be both.
Yeah, and it's sometimes you need maybe more in some situations. A wise person realizes that formalism comes more to the fore, and in other cases, a utilitarian approach moves from figure to ground, or vice versa. So utilitarianism, it might be good for everybody just to kind of take a look at those bullets. What the key thing is it measures the worth of an act by its consequences. The challenge is you don't already always know what the consequences may be. It's helpful if you've had a lot of experience so that you can pretty much predict what the consequences might likely be. Now, when taken to the extreme, utilitarianism produces almost anarchy. Kind of, if it feels good, do it. Um,
I was
it,
coaching a new entrepreneur one time, and we were talking about this about running a business. And I said, well, there's some when you look at business rules, right? So I say generally, um, we agree to pay you every 2 weeks. And now, if I miss payroll, that's something you never want to do as a
yeah,
business leader, right? So I'm a formalist. If I hire you and I say that I'm going to pay you every 2 weeks and you work, you're getting paid. So you have to have that honor code of trust, and it's a
yeah,
formal agreement. But on the other hand, if I say we start at 8:30, I understand there's traffic, it's complex for people in the morning, just get here some between 8:30 and 9. Even though the formal rule might be that we start the day at 8:30, but I'm
yeah.
more of a utilitarianism when it comes to that on running the business.
Yeah, and so we're jumping to something now, which is fine because we might not get to everything. And that is the concept of, now let's talk about a team. The concept of having a team charter, which all that means is what are the general norms that we're going to abide by? And some of those norms can be utilitarian in nature, like what you just said, Jenny, about arrival time. And some of those norms can be very formalistic. But if we all know and share the same norms, we can go forward. But what happens in corporations is all of us are individuals, and on some things we're formalistic, on some things we're utilitarian, and it just all it does, that's what really causes problems. So a guy who took my MBA global management class. When Volkswagen, first came in, he was hired and was working there in finance. And I was talking to him, how's it going? He said, "Oh man, if I hadn't had your class, I would think I'm being fired every day." I said, "What do you mean? Give me an example." He's like, "Well, like in one of our meetings, this guy came in like about 10 minutes late. And the first meeting stopped, and the first thing, the German expat who was running the meeting said, 'You're late.' And he's like, 'Yeah, traffic was really bad on 24, and he's like, 'You're late.' Okay. There was no utilitarian understanding, right? It's like, you figure out how to be here on time. Maybe that means coming half an hour early to make sure you're on time. These are just kind of psychological contrasts associated with these two views. And again, you can have both, but that's the art of being an excellent manager or leader is designing a, a corporate culture system that allows for both to happen. So we generate rules and policies, obviously, from these two approaches. And we won't go through each of these, but these are just some examples. Utilitarian policies are very oriented towards differentiation. Formalistic policies are very oriented around identification and fairness. And not even so much fairness, but consistency, right? Across, like, no, we don't do refunds. So another quick example here. Years ago, I was coming back from either an academic conference or consulting or something. I just remember tired. I'm in Chicago Airport, and one of those little the little terminals that fly to places like where we live,
Yeah,
Chattanooga or other places.
really small.
Yeah, those little ones. And I was going to Nashville and then catching I forget what it was called before, two iterations before Groom Shuttle. And I was going to have to get on a shuttle late at night. I was very late at night already, and come down to Chattanooga. And I was just, there was, it wasn't very crowded in there. It was very late. And I look at this one gate and it said Chattanooga on it, but I'm going to Nashville. And I thought, "Yeah, I guess I'll just, nothing else to do." So these two, workers for the airline at the desk, I walked up and I said, I have a question. I got a flight to Nashville, but really I'm trying to get to Chattanooga. And at that point, they were two women, and one of them just kind of edged off. And I said, I explained I'm catching a shuttle, but I just really want to get to Chattanooga because somebody can drive me over, get my car. I know you probably can't do it. And she took a quick glance. She was all by herself, and she kind of just said, I forget the exact words, but it was just don't talk about this with anybody. And she changed my ticket for free.
That's amazing.
So what she did was break the identification, fairness, consistency policy of formalism. And she recognized that it's in my best interest. It's kind of a no harm, no foul. I don't think, well, back then, I don't know what the penalties were. This was a while ago. Anyway, she just made the decision she differentiated. So now this is where it gets fascinating to me. You and I, we're not like 100% formalists or 100% utilitarians. We are very complex individuals. In some aspects of life, we're formalist. In other aspects of life, we're utilitarian. I can tell you, don't try to send me any pirated software or anything like that for free. I am a very big formalist on intellectual property. I mean, ridiculously so. I'm not exactly sure why. I just am. To me, money is, you don't mess with money. You don't mess with that kind of thing. Obviously, on the right-hand side, I'm a utilitarian on traffic speed limits. My dad was very punctual. He was never late for anything, so he was more of a formalist on that. But you can kind of see how people who are good people, moral people, can take different views depending upon whether they see something from a utilitarian standpoint versus a formalistic standpoint. So, I mean, it's true for religion. It's true for every aspect of life. So when I lived in Japan, there are even more or as many different denominations of Buddhism as there are, denominations of Christianity. And if you ask them, oh, so what does your denomination believe in? Most of the time, the denomination they're a member of, the individual person doesn't necessarily believe in the doctrine, so to speak, of the denomination they're part of. And I think it's true in Christianity as well. A formalist would say, well, why are you going to that church if you really don't believe all the doctrine of it? It's like, well, it's good for my family. It's good. You know what I mean? And so a formalist would go like, that just doesn't compute with me. But someone with more of a spiritual utilitarian kind of perspective doesn't have a problem with that. And you can see how this can create arguments with people and in marriages over all kinds of things, right?
It really can.
So think of someone who you work with now or in the past who you liked, but they just annoyed the heck out of you and you really kind of preferred not to work with them. I'm going to ask you to think about whether you held a utilitarian perspective about the thing that annoyed you, and they held more of a formalist perspective, or vice versa. I'm guessing that kind of resonates. Okay. I can think of people. Okay, I think this is very practical. This can help take a lot of the aggravation, hate, annoyance away when when you can see this, it just opens a lot of things so that you deal with things without a lot of emotion,
Right.
and you can move forward with people. And I'm telling you, I've told people like, you know what? The world can be boiled down to this, and it looks like you're utilitarian on this, and I'm a formalist, and it helps. I'm telling you, it helps at an interpersonal one-on-one level. And it will help on a team level once everybody understands this is how we're going to do things. Even though maybe I'm a formalist and I'm a little uncomfortable with this, the team has agreed, we're going to be more innovative and utilitarian in this realm. It's like, okay, that's the way it is. I can either stay in then it's my choice.
Do you see sometimes this follows like professions? I mean, there was an example that was coming to my mind when you were talking is that my brother is a very technical person. He's more of a utilitarian. No, he's more of a formalist. He's a
Yeah.
mechanical engineer. And so everything is very precise for him. And so in his profession, if he doesn't get it right, there's great, demise. I mean, there's a great risk and peril. And so,
Yeah.
whereas in my profession, where we're being very creative, we can kind of meld and mold things. I don't carry that same. We have different perspectives, and I see that.
Yeah.
as
And
formal-
this is kind of where stereotypes come from, right? Usually there's something to a stereotype. They're just kind of dangerous, like engineers or accountants or artists but I don't know that anybody's like 100% in all aspects of their life a formalist or utilitarian. Okay. Make an exception to a rule when the overall good will occur by so doing. That's really just straight utilitarianism. But I'm going to say this. There are some rules, right? There are some rules that, formal rules that you should never break. They're big, big rules. Enron found out about so when we talk about making exceptions to rules, what I'm talking about is rules that can have sometimes exceptions made to them. And those are judgment. I mean, a lot of times those aren't even judgment calls if someone's halfway with it, you know. But beneath that level, even though rules are pretty strong, if you can get buy-in maybe, right, to make exceptions, etc. Sometimes you make an exception to a rule when doing so recognizes and promotes affiliation. And so I won't go into this long story, but so basically, if you're running a team, let's say you're at some big organization like, Unum or TVA or something, and your team's just been doing well, and maybe there's like a policy, even an unwritten rule that, you don't, and I don't even, those are just general corporations. I don't know what their rules are. Maybe there's a rule, you're not supposed to leave before 5 o'clock, or something like that. Maybe at 3:30, you go take your team to Clumpy's ice cream or something and do a kind of a reward, kind of a, hey, thank you, everybody kind of thing. And maybe if somebody calls you on that, you're like, we were at work. We were working at Clumpy's. Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? You can, but so that's that principle of membership and affiliation where maybe sometimes you do things that are against a formal rule that technically break it, but actually transcend it. So the key is balance, control without rigidity, looseness and tightness at the right moments. It's an art. It's an art. But I will say this, never do anything that violates your personal values to the degree that you have trouble looking at the mirror at yourself in the morning. Now, I'll end on one thing. Learn to differentiate preference from principle. A lot of times, and this is especially true globally, people will think that something is wrong overseas when really it's not so much that it's inherently evil or bad or anything. It's a matter of preference. Now, there are certain things, and if you really get into studying this, there are certain areas of life that are universal across cultures that uh, demand, not killing people, not doing all these kinds of things. But there's a lot there. Sometimes we mistake within ourselves our preference for something for some kind of moral truth. And that takes just a lot of self-study and understanding. But I have found this, frankly, in my life to be very, very practical, very, very helpful. And it helps me sometimes make exceptions to rules that are good and actually help the organization, help the help the students, helps the congregation, helps the school of business. But I never violate something that would put people in legal jeopardy or myself or anything like that. So
That's an example of
we went 5 minutes over. I'm so sorry. Oh, sorry, I'm a utilitarian. I went 5 minutes over. I don't feel sorry.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark. I mean, great insight and really important for today for us as leaders to understand this difference of formalism and utilitarianism. And I love this nugget that you just landed on as well, principle versus preference, and some guidance for us as leaders who are having to navigate things. Thanks for helping to make that a little bit easier and to having constructs to think through. It's been amazing. We appreciate you. We appreciate your commitment to join us on Leaders in the Arena and sharing that wisdom. We have more coming up. Check out the bridgeinnovate.com events page to see what's coming up next. We have Carlene Blanding, a vice president at Shaw Industries, talking about talent strategy. And then Tom and Wendy coming in on adaptive leadership growth, some recent retirees from the senior executive level at Unum, sharing their experience there. And then we have a simulation that we're going to be doing here at the studio on experiencing innovation in June, and then hearing from the Chattanooga Future Fund on investing in hope. So please do join us again in every podcast series that you're connected to or through our events page, through our webinar series. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day. Bye now.